Hello all. So we are here live with Kieran Rose, the Autistic Advocate. I've got Shona Murphy with us today, Rachel Winder, who was with us last time, and Jules, who was with us last time as well. So today we are going to be talking about mental health and our mental health as autistic parents. So I'm just going to bring up the fabulous questions that I pre-prepared and then panicked because I couldn't get us live on Facebook. Just give me 2 seconds. Does anybody else want to do any intros for themselves?
Can I say my name's Winder, not Winder?
Oh,
sorry.
Yes, please do. I'm very sorry.
My married name. It's the one that I have to say as I was told. So yeah, I feel some pressure to say it correctly. Sorry.
No, that is absolutely fine.
Apologies if I sound really pedantic.
Lots of people get my surname wrong. My surname's Jenks, and people don't like to stop. That's what I find. People want to carry on and give me some more syllables at the end. They want me to be Jenkins or Jenkinson. They don't
really
stop. Yeah.
Do you know, I had one person. I went to pick up some medicine for my dog, and we weren't allowed in because of COVID. And you got masks on, so it adds to you can't really hear people very well. And then this woman says, what's your surname? So I told her, and she went off, came back again. I can't find your name, she says. Can you spell it for me? So I said, spelt it for her, to spell it a few times because she couldn't hear me. And she went back and then she looked at it and she went, oh, you mean Winder? I was like, you're telling me how to pronounce my own surname.
Your own surname, because you did it wrong. Yeah, for your own surname. Well done.
Thanks for telling me that. Yeah.
I'm having a mare today, guys. I'm having a mare because now I've got the questions and it won't open the document for me. Just going to stop having a heart attack.
Then while we're waiting.
It's fine because I've just got some notes. I'm just going to work off the notes, and then while Kieran's asking the question, I'm going to listen and open at the same time and just stop panicking. It will be fine. So our first question was about burnout, and it was kind of multi-part, really.
Okay.
So it was, can you feel it coming on? And if so, what can you do about it? If you're in the middle of it, how do you come out the other side of it?
Not two small questions to start with.
I'm not starting off at
all. For the first part, can you feel it coming on? That's very dependent on you as a person, how self-aware you are of yourself. But yes, it's absolutely possible to feel it coming on. Sometimes it can be surprising and you can find yourself right smack bang in the middle of it without even knowing how you got there. But if you know what to look for, if you know yourself fairly well, you can start to see kind of red flags kind of popping up, and usually it's around kind of feeling tired, which probably most of us do all the time, but feeling more tired than usual. Sensory flags as well. So if there are things that start to irritate us that little bit more, or things start to hurt more than they usually do, or even good stuff sometimes can be a little bit more overwhelming than usual. Usually that means if that's happening consistently over a period of time, usually that means that you're on the path, you're kind of heading there. And demand avoidance is a massive one as well. If you're not PDA, if you are autistic but your demand avoidance starts kicking in more and more, I actually find with me on social media, I know when burnout's coming because I'll start reading things and I'll start to make replies, and then about halfway through I'm just like, no, I just really can't be bothered. And usually I'm not like that at all. Usually I'll be kind of like in there, whatever, answering, posting links and like wanting to help or wanting to answer or engage. And when I find I don't want to do that, I know I'm not in a good place. Yeah. So it's just kind of little thing. It changes from person to person, obviously, because burnout is a little bit different for all of us, how it impacts us. But kind of those flags are probably the biggest indicators. And in our children as well, we will see these things in our kids. We know when something's up with our children. We know when something's not right. We know when their mood, when they're maybe a little more quick to temper, a little bit more easy to upset. Those kind of things are usually, and around tiredness and stuff like that and lethargy are usually the kind of indicators.
Yeah, I think I could certainly think of this for my daughter, and I don't know if other parents whose children are also autistic feel the same. But when I am looking for signs in my daughter that things are getting too much, I think back to how she was when we sought diagnosis, because that was as traumatized as she gets. You know, that was kind of as bad as it was. So when I start to see those little things sneaking back, then it's like, right, and we need to step back and make changes. This year's helped. Obviously, she's a PDA, so for a lot of her it's demands, and so this year's been great for her, because she can sit around in her pajamas all the time, and it's totally cool. I mean, to be fair, I have kind of just
isn't that all of us
and just gone, do you know what, you want to sit around in your pajamas all day? Okay. what harm does it do? Yeah, exactly. But yeah, looking out for those little signs and symptoms. Okay, yeah.
It's kind of changes in your kind of emotional self and your physical self. It's like anything that's not quite right is usually a kind of an indicator that something's not quite right.
Rachel, sorry.
Oh, it's okay. I was going to say, I don't know if anybody else experiences this, but I find it really difficult when I'm so busy observing my son to help him because I can't do both, like looking on myself and at him, that it's almost like it's a complex cycle of trying to take it in turns or just forget about myself until the point where I just go poof. It's like, Mommy just went nuclear.
Yeah.
And then while I'm running my nuclear, because I didn't spot it, I've managed to develop, I don't know how I did this, but I've managed to develop a script where I'm basically saying again and again and again, I'm sorry I'm shouting.
Yeah.
I'm not upset at you. I'm just overwhelmed.
Yeah.
I love you very much. Anybody who's listening, it's just like, oh, and then there's another thing that I say. There are not enough drugs and alcohol, not recommending these things in the world to help me cope with the feelings I have right now. Yeah, that's it. So there you go.
Do you know what though? That links into another really interesting point about autistic mental health, which actually I hadn't written a question about, but is a wonderful one to pose to Kieran, about addiction tendencies. It linked to mental health with autistic people. I don't know how to phrase that as a question, because that was kind of a fact. That when mental
legal reasons. All my drugs are prescription.
I'm not accusing you at all, right? No, it was just that you were by raising that topic of drugs and alcohol, we know that that it is more common for us, isn't it?
There's a high prevalence. I work with a charity called Addictions UK, and they came to see me do a talk. Neurodivergency wasn't really on their radar at all. Autism definitely wasn't. And they just happened to come and see me do a talk, and then started realizing how many people they were supporting that were very obviously neurodivergent and that hadn't even triggered for them.
Yeah.
There is a large prevalence of addiction. I've been through that myself. And for me, it was partly a coping mechanism with an unhappiness kind of thing. But also it was partly about masking as well, and about leveling that playing field, because I was a different person when I was taking certain not legal drugs, you know, so it enabled me to kind of step out and be this other person that could be the life and soul of the party and was in the middle of everything, and that very much wasn't me and isn't me, but it enabled me to become that, because then that kept me safe. It stopped me from being picked on, because, you know, everybody loved Kieran when he was doing certain things. And it just kept me safe. So I think it's less that we are more prone to it, and more that it becomes a way of giving us a crutch. I think that's more where it is. And I think when you talk to mental health, especially addiction services, it's all, well, autistic people are more prone to this, autistic people and mental health, it's just there, it's part of being autistic. And it isn't at all. There's a very separate thing. And those things, and, you know, someone that's obviously not the same for everybody, but generally I would say an autistic person that ends up with some kind of addiction like that, be it video gaming, be it drugs, be it alcohol, be it anything, usually it's because it's a crutch away from the real problems that they have in their life, and it's a way of sidestepping them or hiding away from them and just basically not thinking about it. You can lose yourself in a video game, so therefore you don't have to think about the problems that you have in your life. So it's a crutch away from that. And and obviously addiction covers a huge spectrum of things, but I would say that's why the prevalence is there. But we have to distinguish between being autistic and having mental health problems, because the two are very, very closely connected, but they are not the same thing. But mental health services in the UK are set up to say that they are the same thing, though, which is part of the problem.
That is part of the diagnostic criteria, isn't it? The diagnostic criteria is not an autistic person, it's an autistic person.
It's a traumatized person.
Trauma. So it's not the same thing. But also that was one of our questions as well, was
sorry.
Oh, yeah,
sure. Question.
No, go on, and then I'll do the question.
So we don't yet know what autism looks like without trauma.
No.
So yeah, so that means the DSM-5 and things before that are based on traumatized autistic people set up in environments that don't meet needs. So the results are wrong, false, or whatever you want to call it, and therefore the criteria that they use to diagnose people is hugely flawed.
I saw
because it's just such a joke that there are people in like really like up here jobs that filter all that down, you know, and then there are people like worldwide believing that they're somehow broken, and it's just not true. You know. So anyway, sorry.
No, I saw an infographic only today that was showing like a Venn diagram of autism, ADHD, and PTSD, but in with the autism, they've got anxious in social circumstances, and I took umbrage to it, because I thought, well, yeah, I am, and probably most autistic people I know are, but it's a learned response. It's not an innate response. It's that feeling like you're wrong all the time, and quite possibly as a child being frequently told that you're wrong in social settings. That's what creates.
Well, there is an autistic social setting though.
Oh well, indeed. No, largely schools, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, when you're a child.
It's mixed and predominantly NT settings. There was INSARS going on this week, the International Autism Research Conference, which is mostly ableist guff. But there was a poster I saw on Twitter today, which was research into autistic specific anxiety, which was looking at the amygdala and trying to say that we have our own special brand of anxiety that is innately part of us. And
we sell it. Can we sell it?
Yeah, I want to give it away. But you know, it's rubbish. There's so much context missing, because they're looking at us in a vacuum. They're not looking at us in a social world where we interact with other people and other people influence us negatively. They don't see that. They look at us in this vacuum and then assume that everything that goes wrong is because we're autistic, and it's not. Most of the things that go wrong for us are because we're not in a vacuum. It's because we're surrounded by people who don't think and feel like we do.
Yeah. So autism plus environment equals outcome. Luke Bearden.
Funny that, isn't it? Yeah.
This is it. I probably live half my life in memes. But another meme I've seen says, before you diagnose yourself with depression, make sure you're not just surrounded by bastards. And I think that's a bit.
I saw that the other day.
It's like, are we mentally unwell, or do we just live in a world that doesn't fit us in very well? So the question I was going to ask was about accessing support and accessing help. How, where do we get exactly where do we get the appropriate support? I've come across too many people who've just been categorically told.
Sorry.
I've just come across too many autistic people who've been categorically told you cannot access mental health support because you're autistic. Everything that you're describing is just because you're autistic. There isn't anything we can do for you, and that's not on.
Yeah.
It's a postcode lottery, firstly. There are some areas in the UK which do provide...
I'm going to
There's like 3 of them.
Put it in the comments, and we'll cover it with Jules.
Programs called when they move people. We have like an autism specific of like places, you know.
All the autistics in the UK living in 4 different
flocking to one place.
This happens with the deaf community. They quite commonly like populate large cities like Birmingham and Derby and London and Manchester. Yep, that's what we need.
Yeah,
that's what we need. Okay, but outside of that,
it is a postcode lottery, so it very much depends on where you live and what services you're surrounded by. The common response for adults is we cannot help you because you're autistic, therefore you don't fit into our system, and mental health should just be, you know, you just got to get on with that because that's part of being autistic. And it's quite often the same with children's as well, in terms of CAMHS and SIPs. Parents are often told by CAMHS and SIPs we cannot help your child because they're autistic. And, you know, to a degree, I would rather that they did that to an extent, rather than taking a child in and doing all of those kind of non-autistic things to them that are going to make the situation work. I would rather a service kind of said, no, we can't help. It's a difficult one because there are autistic therapists dotted very sporadically around the UK. I'm very lucky to have one up here near me in Sunderland, who does work nationally, actually. And I would say that's your best bet. Someone who is at the very least neurodivergent, who has an understanding of where you're coming from, can truly give you empathy because they can stand in your shoes and see it from your perspective, and is able to enable you kind of through that. And, you know, we do have certain areas that are offering modified DBT and modified CBT. I don't know too much about those, but it still makes me icky because it's still non-autistic people that are developing these things and using kind of observations and things to kind of clarify that. And the problem is with a lot of therapies that we are offered as adults is that things like CBT and stuff center issues within the person. So when you are non-autistic and you see someone who is reacting badly to certain situations, and as a non-autistic person, you think, well, I'll be all right in that situation, so that's definitely their problem. Often it isn't, because you're not able to see it from the autistic person or neurodivergent person's perspective and see that actually it's not centered in them. It is a reaction to this social world that we live in and the problems that are in there. And navigating those things can be doubly hard for someone who can't use telephones, struggles with processing information, conversations with people, all of those kind of things. And then we do have those systemic barriers to accessing all of this stuff because of we kind of anticipate what reaction we're going to get and that it's not really going to help. The best kind of therapies that I've ever had have actually been talking therapies, just where I can go and go bleh, and splurge at someone and leave. I went through 10 therapy sessions through the NHS years ago, and I finished that last session and walked out, and a couple of days later my therapist bumped into me and I didn't have a clue who she was because I hadn't looked at her for the whole 10 sessions.
Right.
I didn't know her from Adam. So, and she was like, oh, how are you getting on? And was like, I don't know who you are or why you're asking me these questions. You know, so it's kind of, we need to kind of seek out people who are like us because they know what life is like for us. And that's a kind of common sense thing, but finding those people is really, really hard. I will give you the link to the organization that's up near me, then that's at least one, but there are others dotted around the country. But the problem is as well that when you have a neurodivergent therapist, they're facing the same problems that we are also facing.
Yeah.
They don't necessarily have solutions for you because they're stuck with the same issues and hitting the same barriers. And but at least it's companionability. It's someone who's going to be able to listen and nod and understand and truly understand and isn't going to gaslight you. And they're the kind of things that we often need.
Yeah. Just sometimes there isn't an answer, is there? Sometimes the answer is just, yeah, you're right, that is shit. But that is the shape.
And sometimes that's all you need.
Mm.
Quite often for me, that's all I need. My wife is wonderful, but she's a big fixer. She likes to fix problems. And quite often I don't need my problems fixed. Quite often I just need to go, rah, and that's enough, because I know that she can't fix it. So talking about it more is just going to aggravate me more and tire me out more. And I just need someone just to go, yeah, that's really shit. And yeah, they are an awful person and they have done a horrible thing, or this situation is terrible, and sometimes that's just what we need, just someone to validate us.
Yeah, absolutely. You will also, for our watchers, we have got the small peer support groups that will do that too. And you can do it on our private peer support page as well, that if you want to go on and do a bit of shouting into the void, and just have some people who understand, who've been there, nod and say, yes, you're right. Then absolutely we're there for that.
To further back that up, Ruth, as well, because the service that you are providing is really, really important, because community connectedness is so vital to all of this, because we need people like us, because they understand us and we can relate to them and they can relate to us. Not all the time, obviously, but generally people are going to understand the situations that we're in and be supportive around that. Without that, we don't have much at all. And we do provide this for ourselves. We have to provide this for ourselves because nobody else is doing it. And until we can rip those systems down and build our own and get funding for therapies, for therapeutic support and all of those kind of things, that the things that we need and the way that we need them, we have to rely on each other to provide that, which is really hard because we're all traumatized. So it's a bunch of traumatized people offering trauma support to traumatized people, which isn't ideal.
No, but then as we say, we currently don't know what non-traumatized autistic people look like. So if there's non-traumatized autistic people out there, they're probably not identifying as autistic, which makes it tricky, doesn't it?
It does.
Shona, I think that you were talking earlier and you were on mute, so I didn't see. Did I interrupt you? Was there something that you'd wanted to contribute and I interrupted you? You're on mute still.
I don't think I'm saying that. I think I was just saying about it was when you were looking for the sheet and I was saying we could do introductions. That might have been it.
Oh, sorry.
It's fine.
I'm trying to watch everybody at once, but when I get excited, I get closer and closer to the screen, and then I can only see one person. So I'm sorry. Please do put your hand up or give a shout if I'm ignoring what you're saying. Jules, have we had any questions come in on the group yet that we would like to pose to Kieran?
No questions, but some really great comments. I'll start from the top. Talking about homeschooling at the beginning, homeschooling in pajamas. One person, I'm lucky as I self-medicated all through my 20s and could have easily become addicted. I have a very addictive personality. If something makes me feel good and it helps in social situations, luckily I now have an understanding and don't try to mask anymore in situations. And that's a big part. Stop taking off that mask and starting to just be ourselves. I still say autistic academics and autistic professionals should be developing criteria and diagnosing, not neurotypicals. That's a point I was just making myself today. So I don't know how many people I've told. I know the AP UK group know that I just recently took the level 2 understanding autism course because it was free in my area to do. And I took it out of interest because everyone was slagging it off. And I thought, I want to actually see this with my own eyes. And I finished it a couple of weeks ago. And I got my certificate and my pass confirmation today. And it said, would you like to provide any feedback on this course? Yes, I did want to provide a lot of feedback on the course. But the biggest thing was, this course needs reviewing by actual autistics because a lot of it's outdated. A lot of it's perpetuating, male stereotypes. There's nothing in there about masking, and quite a lot of it's pretty offensive. So, Another comment, we are the purest form. We vibrate so much higher, which is why we are aware of so much more than muggles. Like, yeah, no help post 16 for my autistic child who was struggling because they are autistic.
Yeah.
Mental health services in the whole was totally useless in 98 to 90. Lots of people, thankfully, my autistic friends were there to turn to, so supportive, and a good autistic friend kind of mentored my autistic child through it.
Yeah.
That's not clear.
Good. Good.
He did, yes, relying on each other. We don't need to feel like we are wrong, so calms I feel are not best option. We need to empower our children rather than trying to make them fit in. Otherwise, it causes trauma in adult life, having to suppress who you are.
Yeah. Yeah. And it can take an awfully long time to unpick as well, can't it? You know, of working out who you actually are, and what is going on underneath that mask, and which bits are you and which bits are mask. And yeah, and that in itself can be quite traumatizing, can't it?
Yeah.
Working out, you know, who you are and how you actually want to respond to things can be tricky. That I've had that going on the last couple of years. I still have little moments. I purposely mask for work, which in some ways is really nice, but is also completely exhausting. And in some ways, I'm a bit jealous. I'm a bit jealous of the Ruth that I am at work, because like she's quite bubbly and fun and joyous, and I kind of wish that I was like that all the time. It's a bit of a lie, and I have to sleep after I've done it. And my body just goes, right, that's it. You faked being human for long enough now. Now you just need to be unconscious.
See, that would be the ideal for me. I mean, despite the fact that I ran that campaign a few years ago, which was called Take the Mask Off, I don't actually align with that concept, that way of thinking. That was more taking the mask off of masking. It was a bit of a parody in terms of how we termed it. But it's about safety and control, and you can't ever stop masking. You can't, because you're never going to be perfectly safe unless you're in some bubble again, you know, some vacuum where you never interact with anybody else. Then you can be authentically you all the time. So it's about what you're doing, you're choosing. So you've taken control. You know that in that situation you don't feel safe and comfortable to be authentically you, so therefore you have to do what you need to do. And that's about you taking control. It's when we're not in control of it, when it's in control of us, and it's there all the time, that's when you're in a really bad place, really. And it was just interesting what Jules said, the comment there earlier about kind of having an addictive personality. If that's an autistic person, we have to be careful around that, because that's actually a deficit way of looking at who you are. But actually what you're describing there is monotropism, which is our neurology, which is we're attention focused. So if there's something that makes you feel good and it distracts you from the crap you've got going on, then your brain's going to go, yep, let's put all our attention into that thing. And then, you know, the same with masking. Our monotropic neurology is built to mask, because it becomes a need. It's something that has our attention. So we go, let's do this thing to the full extent that we possibly can, however that looks. So we just have to be kind of careful when we say things like that, because that actually damns ourselves. And I know obviously that it was obviously said in a kind of a bit of a flippant way, but it's important to know that you don't have an addictive personality. You're autistic, and your brain has found a way of keeping you safe. So that's a better way of kind of looking at it, and your brain's found something it really likes as well.
Yeah, and then it's just having the conscious awareness to try and channel it towards something healthy. Yeah, lovely. Yes, I saw Spectrum Gaming put something up the other day about video game addiction, and that actually the way that it's often presented is backwards. It was really useful for me. My eldest is very into video games, and I go through phases of being completely fine with it and phases of completely panicking that I'm allowing him to ruin his life. So it was really useful to see, and what he was saying, I think it's you, I'll say they, to just be Andy, because I'm not sure. Okay. Yeah. That when the outside life calmed down and was more dealable, the addiction kind of went dissipated away a bit, because you don't need it. As you say, it's that need, isn't it?
And then that brings us back to things like CBT and stuff like that, because if you, by changing the person, you're not changing the problem. The problem still exists. All you're doing is teaching someone to mask by identifying the issue within them. So with things like, if we do need to reframe things like gaming addictions and stuff, because if an autistic person is seen as having a gaming addiction, then why do they have that addiction? What is it that is causing them to be so focused on that game that nothing else is important in their life anymore?
Yeah.
Obviously it's because they're not safe. So if you start making changes in that environment, again to use Luke's kind of paraphrase Luke, if you start making changes in that environment, and that environment is not just the geographical environment or the physical environment, it's the people in that environment and the demands and the pressures from that environment as well. It's a full holistic whole body thing that you need to think about. If you start making changes in that, then you will find that things like what you perceive as an addiction will dissipate, because in actual fact, what is you see as an addiction is that person being safe, and staying safe and keeping themselves safe.
That's it. And for us as well, I mean, it's also particularly with video games here, it's also that what is discussed around video games is normally from a neurotypical viewpoint, and how it affects neurotypical brains, not how it affects neurodivergent brains. And what it does for us, I see it in all of my kids, that screens is such a regulatory tool. There's no way I could take the screens away from them. And largely, they're very good at self-regulating, that they know that for now, it's best to look at a screen for a bit and lose themselves a little bit. Then I've had enough, and they'll put it down, and they'll go outside and they'll play with normal toys, and they'll talk to each other, and they'll, interact kind of as you'd expect of any child, and that for me, I then don't worry, I don't count the hours, and I know that sometimes they'll have pretty much a whole day where they get up and they'll be on screens until they go to bed, but then the next day they might not pick it up at all. And for me, I just think, well, that's really healthy, and it's only the same as us grown-ups, isn't it? We do it, we've got our phones next to us all the time.
There's also an assumption that when children are on screens, they're not learning.
Yes.
And they are.
Yeah.
Enormously.
Yeah.
Or that they're not socializing as well.
Yeah.
And they are.
Yeah, that's it. One of the things I've realized with my big boy is that, one of the reasons that he's been very, very into online games this year is because we haven't been seeing any human beings outside of this house, of course, because nobody has. And he is, he's sometimes he's talking to people he knows, and sometimes he's talking to people he doesn't know, but he's doing lots of interacting and social stuff, but at that really nice, safe distance. It's not like interacting with people in the real world, because you can just hang up. If you've had enough, you just stop, don't you? And you walk away, and there's no real hardship with it. I mean,
that's the ironic thing with that as well, is that I bet all of us have friends in different countries that we talk to over the internet all of the time. And even those that live in the same country. I mean, Shona and I, we talk predominantly over Twitter. When we're talking to each other, we message each other over Twitter, or we'll talk publicly on Twitter. We have friends everywhere that we connect with, and that we talk to, on friends on different levels as well. Some of my closest friends I've never met, but yet there are people that I talk to every day and share my deepest, darkest secrets with. So why can't our children, who are going to grow up to be like us, also do the same?
And I think it's admitting the change in the shape of the world as well. It's happened in quite a short amount of time, but just in our lifetimes, we have gone from a not predominantly technological world to a predominantly technological world. I did the same with my eldest handwriting. That he's got really messy handwriting, but he's dyspraxic, so he actually finds it quite uncomfortable to hold pens. He doesn't like doing it. And I just went, do you know what? You can write, and as a grown-up, the only thing you'll probably ever have to write is when you sign your name, and you type faster than I do. And actually, that's probably a much more useful skill to have in 2021 than being able to write neatly. Nobody can, you can get away with having awful handwriting, can't you? Because you just don't use it anymore. I think we've
digressed a little.
But
no, we haven't, because all of these social pressures are what cause mental health problems in our children, and then negatively impact us because they cause mental health problems for us as well. It's those pressures are very, very real.
Definitely. So, talking about we touched a bit upon therapies that probably don't work for autistic people, and looking more for therapies that do work for autistic people. And you spoke a bit about obviously the peer support that we provide, and other ways of interacting with other autistic people that might just be able to understand you. Are there any specific therapies that that tend to work and tend to be good for the autistic or neurodivergent type of person?
I don't really adhere to models of therapy like that.
Okay.
I prefer to take holistic views of people and look at them not as people who have a problem here, but people who have a problem here.
Yeah.
I think that OTs are massively important for autistic people. OTs who know what they're talking about in terms of sensory stuff, who aren't focused on how do we hold a pen, as most NHS OTs unfortunately are. But OTs that can work with us to help us understand our sensory needs and our sensory regulation, first of all, because we can't go out and change that world. We cannot do that. We're all trying, but we can't go out and change everywhere. So we need to understand ourselves and understand how our bodies and brains are going to react in certain situations. So the more we understand ourselves, the more important that is. And I think even with people that maybe identify as having depression or mental health problems would benefit from that, because our sensory system is so important, so important. It's everything. Without our senses, we're dead. We're nothing. It's everything about our existence, and yet it's the bits that we don't talk about. We talk independently about, well, usually the 5 senses and never really the 8 senses, but we talk about them like they don't work together, like they're independent things, but they're not. They're all interconnected and they're all working. And when someone is having mental health problems, I would bet 10 out of 10 of them are dysregulated enormously. So if we can help them with that dysregulation, it can then help them feel more confident about dealing with the problems that they have in their life. So I think probably talking therapies, some autistic people do have said that CBTs work for them, but I think that's usually when it's probably an unwitting neurodivergent practitioner that's doing it with them. And I probably would say it isn't pure CBT. Some people sing the praises of EMDR to work through trauma and stuff like that. Others don't. Others find it horrible. So, it's very much an individual thing. And it's very much depends on who's doing the therapy as well.
Yes. Yeah. And as you say, I really liked your point, because really it's about treating that individual, isn't it? And respecting them and believing them, and trusting them when they say this thing for me was a traumatic event. It's not minimizing that and feeling the urge to say, well, it wasn't really though, was it? It's listening and accepting that and helping them move past it.
It is absolutely horrifying how many mental health practitioners I've come across that don't understand that trauma is subjective. I mean, that should be your starting point. That
shouldn't it? That should
just because something isn't for me doesn't mean it's not for you. And that should be the starting point of everything. And it's scary how many don't know that.
I do have quite a few questions have come in since last time.
Great.
So one asking for the peer support group web address. So I've said we'll put that in the comments afterwards for our AP UK peer support. Is there a directory of autistic therapists or psychiatrists? So I don't think so. Maybe that's you can start developing.
So it's on my list. I've worked with an organisation that's doing this for speech and language therapists and OTs. That's an international directory, so there'll be people from all over the world on there. But for mental health practitioners, no, there isn't currently that I'm aware of. But it's on my radar and on several other people's radar. So hopefully in the near future, something similar to what I've got going with the OTs and SLTs will happen for mental health practitioners as well.
Do other charities in the rest of the UK have affinity programs?
Affinity for what does it say?
Doesn't.
We'll see.
Add in another comment, just giving us a bit more information on what your question is.
Yeah.
Dennis asked another question further down. There are so many comments. Thank you everyone for all the comments. I did notice Dennis had asked another question further down. Any guidance on being an autistic parent to a neurotypical child? Oh, that's one we'll definitely look at. We probably need another call for that one.
We might be here sometime.
We're just going to keep calling Kieran back until he says no.
It's fine. I don't mind, honestly. I love what you guys do, so I'll happily come back.
Good. Well, we love having you. So good.
Damon's commented, Dysgraphia 101 or get ABA by Mavis teaching typing. I don't understand.
That will be for my boy. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I decided that there was no point highlighting perceived deficits. It was better to just highlight what he was actually already doing and was very good at. And to me, it made more sense to just go, do you know what, you're great at that. Just do more of that. There was, I think this was on a home education site. As I say, I live my life in memes. We're just going to have to accept that for today. But it was, no, it's not going to come to me who it was, but it was a famous educator who's written quite a lot of books. And they were saying that so often if you have a child who's bad at maths and good at tennis, they'll get a tutor for the maths. Well, just drop the maths and get them a tutor for the tennis. That to me makes much more sense. And that is what I try and do with my kids. I do have the privilege that I'm able to home educate them. So I am able to do that, of just go, do you know what, if you really hate that and it isn't going to give you any direct benefit in your life, then okay, cool. You've got to be able to read and write, and you do need to have a little bit of maths, but you don't need to be able to work out the fulcrum of a cone, for example, which is on the current GCSE curriculum. That's a small section of a cone. I don't think that it's going to give my children any direct benefit in their life. And if they do need it, they can probably Google it. Have we got any more questions specifically about mental health for Kieran? I'll stop talking about home education because that's, again, a totally different topic.
Great comments. No more questions as such. I just did want to touch on, for me, I had a conversation just last night about ABA and that whole world with a friend who does that. That's our job, and he has an autistic brother, and we had a very, very good conversation about it. So I think another wider conversation about all of that would be useful for me. I'm due to go to school next year. I'm really keen to get some more views on all of that.
Do you want to share your thoughts on ABA in schools, ABA in the UK? Because I don't think it's pushed here under its ABA label like it is in the US.
It's starting to be. There are local authorities up and down the country who are starting to fund it through EHCPs as pure ABA, which is massively problematic. But we have a larger problem with the ABA framework, which is PBS.
Yeah.
Which is everywhere. It's in health, it's in education, it's in care services for non-autistic people as well. It's in old age people's homes, and it's all framed around neuronormative standards, and it's all framed around. I'm having an issue with my mum at the moment, who has moved care homes, and we have certain complaints in against the old care home, and she has a very specific form of dementia called Pick's disease, which is frontal lobe dementia, which means that she displays challenging behavior, that lovely phrase. So they see that as behavior they saw that as behavior to be modified and changed, and that she needed restraint and all of those kind of things, and she's been taken out there very, very quickly. And a lot of this is framed around our miscomprehensions of how the world works, because there seems to have become somehow this drive to conformity, an insistence that everybody does everything in exactly the same way. And if you don't do that, you're deviant, you're broken, you don't work properly, and then we need to therapize you. So ABA and PBS, which is the framework version of ABA, is basically the therapy version of the social world. And it's hardcore, and it's wrong, utterly wrong, dangerous and flawed. And it is a big word to say that ABA is abuse, and a lot of people recoil from that, but it is abusive. It makes children act in ways which are not their natural and authentic way to behave. And that's anybody that puts their child through that should really seriously consider not, because you are hurting them.
I think one of the big dangers as well is by repeatedly teaching children that their physical discomfort and their mental discomfort doesn't matter. We're pre-grooming them, aren't we? And in this world that is very, very conscious of sexual predators towards our children, I think we need to really understand the implications of that we're taking a group of children who are already more vulnerable than the neurotypical group, and then we're making them even more vulnerable again. And I think that really needs to be strongly considered, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It plays into the whole masking narrative as well, in terms of that it's teaching children to second guess themselves, it's teaching children not to listen to their bodies, it's stopping children having boundaries with adults, which is terrifying. All children should have boundaries with adults. All children should be able to say no and refuse to do things. Every child should have that right. And the fact, see, I don't even like that we call children. We bring up adults. That's what we're doing. And we're bringing up a whole generation, again, of adults who have poor boundaries with people, who struggle to socialize with people because of these horrible skills that we're teaching them. They're not skills. I don't even know what the right word for them is. But, this is what we're teaching. We're teaching them to be really bad adults and not be independent, authentic thinking people. And that's wrong. Why would anybody want that?
Mental health issues, or like the suicide rate for autistic people is 3 times higher than the general population. Something wrong there. It's a result of, it's got to be a result of trying to conform to a society that's not made for you. It's built for
and
you.
therapies, behavioral therapies like that, are therapized versions of what society does to us. They're more intense versions of what we have all been through and have all made a struggle in our lives.
That's it. That was what I was circling back into. I'm so glad you came there. But the society does that to us anyway, whether we want it to or not. Society already sends these messages to autistic people all the time that we're doing it a bit wrong and we're a bit broken and we need to change and we need to adapt. And to then make it as intense as ABA is, up to 40 hours a week of being told directly that what you're doing is wrong and that it's not too bright and it's not too loud and it tastes just fine, is just asking for trouble, isn't it, really? You say it's just asking for future mental health difficulties.
Absolutely. I'm going to big up Shona now, because Shona wrote an absolutely wonderful article on this a couple of years ago. So if Shona hasn't got it there, I'll dig it out and I'll put it in the comments after we've finished.
I think one of all the stuff you've been saying about ABA is true, and then you have to add to the fact that people are paying huge amounts of money for them to be close to this.
Oh, it's an industry, isn't it?
It's an industry for local authorities to pay for it, and there's a lot of people there's a lot of people whose careers depend on it, and the reputations. So, and there's a lot of money being made. So there's people with big budgets doing research, which is kind of like just marketing for ABA. And how can autistic people or the people who have been traumatized by it compete with that? How can we get the research out that's showing that it's traumatizing? People are doing small bits of it, but then there's much smaller studies. They're not well funded, and it's really often autistic people doing it for free. Can't compete. And
as well, how do we put it in front of the people that have got the influential decisions?
I often compare it to the tobacco industry and how the tobacco industry basically researched itself for decades and said how wonderful it was, which is effectively what has happened with ABA. There's no longitudinal studies on the efficacy of it. Even in America, the US Army is refusing now to pay for its insurance for ABA for autistic children because they know it's a waste of money. The abuse stuff aside, there are so many reasons why ABA shouldn't exist. And if you can't go down the abuse channel to stop something, you just need to look at how much money is spent on worthless rubbish. If the US government is now turning around and saying, no, it's not worth it, then why is everybody still doing it? It makes no sense at all.
I wonder from a parent's point of view, how much of it comes from fear. I think that in fact, I won't take credit for this. This is Aisha's theory around undiagnosed autistic people who feel that the only way they can cope is to become uber normal, so more normal than a normal person, you know, the soccer mum, the stereotypical manly dad, you know, that completely conforming on all fronts type of person. And then to have a child who is also autistic and is showing up everything that they hate and fear about themselves, that fear response is going to be, oh, I need to make you ultra normal. And that's what ABA promises, isn't it? We know it's lies, and we know that that's not how it works, and that's not what it does. But that is what it says on the tin, isn't it? I will make your child normal again.
Also, once you've gone down that route, it's really hard to accept that it might not have been the right choice.
Yeah, that's it. To put your hand up and say, oh man, I've just really damaged my child. That's a really brave thing to be able to accept and to do.
I had a parent a few years ago that really stuck with me, and it was someone that had put their child through ABA for years and years and years, and they'd grown up and they were in their early 20s, and the parent came to me and said, well, they're having real mental health problems, and they're, you know, we were on the verge a few years ago of taking them back to get their autism diagnosis removed, and now they're acting autistically again. And it really, and we talked about, they didn't mention that the child, the person had been through ABA at that point, but then when we talked about it, and I was like, well, what's the backstory and what's going on in their lives and things, and they said they've been through ABA for years, and I said, the mask just dropped off. That's all that's happened. That is literally what has happened to your child. You've put them through ABA all that time, and all it has taught them is to build up a layer around themselves of unauthentic them, and their authentic them was underneath, and now you're seeing the real them. That's all it's done, is mask it. You've spent I mean, they'd spent thousands and thousands and thousands, and I said, it was, and they didn't like that I'd said that they'd wasted their money. But because they thought their child was fixed.
Yes, that's it, isn't it? So if we flip that around, then for us as recognised, happy, proud, autistic parents, but that we also understand that we carry trauma with us, how do we protect our children from our trauma whilst also protecting them from creating their own trauma?
That's a very big one question. Just a bit.
How do we solve?
I've got 5 minutes to solve everything.
As well as coming privately. Go for it, Kieran. Try and answer that one.
It's a hard one, because, you know, all of us are still unpicking ourselves. We're still trying to figure ourselves out. I think we're lucky to a degree, because non-autistic people don't really think about themselves like we think about ourselves. They don't go as deeply into ourselves when we realize we're autistic and we learn all this new information and we have to reframe our entire lives. Most people don't get the opportunity to do that. Most people don't get the opportunity to dig deep into themselves. And when you've got children, it's really hard to do that at the same time. But you do, you still do. You throw yourself into kind of like, well, that happened then. And then I was to blame for that. And actually, well, was I to blame for that? And you start unpicking all of these things, which in itself is traumatic, because then you realize that you've spent X amount of years being traumatized, and that realization is traumatic within itself. So it's a really, really long process. But I think for our children, being open, safely honest, discussing topics that most people shy away from. I think we said this last time about like dinner table topics that kind of we all have, and the things that we talk about with our children that most people run screaming from. Being honest about how hard the world is as well, and that their lives are not going to be easy. And I think these are conversations that most people don't have with their children. They try and shield them from problems, and they try and shield them from how horrible the world can be. And then they're not prepared for it. You send them out, they go out into the world, and then they're struck by all these waves of awfulness and people that take advantage of them, and systems that take advantage of them and don't work properly. But I think you need to have those honest conversations with your children to arm them and prepare them. Because at the end of the day, we are talked about like we are not resilient. People say that about us, that we are not resilient, that we overreact to things. We are the most resilient creatures on the planet. We put up with all of this crap that's thrown at us, And our children right now are putting up with so much crap. So we need to enable them to take the safety that they have at home and take it to places, make that bubble just a little bit bigger and a little bit bigger and a little bit bigger, and to know when to mask and control that mask, when to keep themselves safe, and to know when they are safe.
Yeah.
Because they don't know that distinction. We struggle with that distinction. We felt unsafe. Most of us probably still do feel unsafe most of the time, unless we're at home. But actually, there's lots of places where we are still safe because we're in control, but we just don't know because we've been taught to second guess ourselves and gaslight ourselves. And so learning our own bodies and helping our children learn their bodies and their brains and understanding themselves, and so that they can go out into the world and let these things bounce off of them as best they can.
Yeah. Yeah. Wonderful. Yes, I think that's brilliant to take forwards. Is that real radical honesty, but giving them not like harsh truth. I think sometimes they do this. We've got to toughen them up. It's not that, is it? It's real honesty, but equally the tools to deal with it. So it's not just saying the world is full of bastards. World is
yeah, exactly. It's not just dumping the problems on them, but it's giving
I'm just
them.
saying, I know you're 7 now, darling. It's time that you should know they're all just bastards.
Just lock the door and don't ever leave the house.
You know, I haven't seen anybody for a year. That's going to carry on. No, but then also saying, look, you know, and this is the tools. And I think one of the things we can teach our autistic children, or try and help our autistic children to learn, is to distinguish between the bastards and the not bastards, because I think that's not something that comes naturally to us.
No.
And we tend to, I know particularly as children, we tend to believe that everybody's lovely, don't we? And it takes us a while to
But we're told that.
Yeah.
We are told that by adults, that you know, adults are safe people and that everybody's lovely, and if you're nice and you speak nicely to someone, they will treat you nicely, and quite often they don't. They take advantage of you because they see you as easy.
Yeah, that's it. Can you squeeze in one more question, or should we
go on? 5 more minutes, I'm fine.
Jules, have we got one more from the general public?
Yeah. How to keep mental health as an autistic non-PDA, I believe, parent, such as myself, this question, when dealing with an autistic PDA kid and potentially PDA ex-partner, struggle with the manipulation and identifying own feelings. Dad's behaviour is pretty abusive to both of us. I'm afraid and depressed. Love to you all and thanks for the event. I really want this one. So.
I would say go and watch Christy Forbes.
Yeah.
PDA is not my area of expertise at all. I don't have an area of expertise, but PDA certainly isn't it. So I would say go and see Christy Forbes. The PDA Society is putting out some really good stuff at the moment. So they are really useful, and you've probably already been there already, but I would say Christy Forbes is probably your best bet over anybody. She has a specific PDA 6-week course where there's videos to watch, and then there's interactive sessions where she'll come and answer questions and things, and you come in a Zoom room with a few other people and stuff. And she also runs a separate online support tool system group thing as well, where she does parent spotlights. So there's peer support in there, and her as well, kind of directing that, where literally if someone's got an issue, they will spotlight that one parent for the whole hour, and everybody comes in and offers support and kind of emotional support, as well as and Christy obviously advice and stuff. But if anybody is going to guide you in the best way, it will be her.
I agree. Christy's fantastic. So
Isn't she? I've got a PDA, and she's fantastic for the insight that she provides, and just being able to understand a little bit more of what's going on.
Yeah.
She's.
I mean, the difficulty with the kind of the ex-husband is that it's not necessarily a situation that you can control, but it's maybe a situation where you can help manage yourself better and protect yourself better. But again, Christy will have massive insight on that as well.
Wonderful. Well, we shall we shall let you go there, Kieran, because I know Kieran's managed to book himself on an important family day, which was what I did last time. So we're running out of birthdays between the two of us.
The next one, there's definitely nothing happening. So,
so thank you ever so much for joining us.
You're very welcome. It's been lovely. I've enjoyed it.
Lovely to see you, and I'm sorry for panicking so much at the beginning.
It's okay.
It was actually as easy as I thought it was going to be, but I managed to convince myself it wasn't. Welcome to my mind. Thank you for. I tell you what, if we let you go, Kieran, and then we'll just pick up on the other.
Yeah, you keep going. Okay, then. See you later. Take care, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Lovely, because one of the things I did want to do before we completely finish was I was all prepared and I sorted out the next date with Kieran, because I thought that would be a really good idea to tell you what the next date with Kieran is going to be before we finish up today. And of course now I've forgotten what that date was that we agreed, because I'm super duper clever and super duper organised like that. So just give me 2 seconds while I look. Do you want to share any of the comments as we're finishing up, Jules?
Yes, you can do. I'll just go back on your reports. Service dogs help with alerting my senses in public. I never thought of a service dog.
Never thought of that. Yeah. No. I wonder if that... Sorry, go on.
That's quite interesting. I'm going to start looking into that. That's a very good comment. That's why we homeschool our children, from Joanne. My eldest writes beautifully and her writing last week went viral, all because she loved writing, so we let her do it 24/7. So this is in response to your tennis versus maths comment. She's just got a 9 on her latest writing. That's fantastic.
Wonderful.
We are creatives. Many of us are creatives. Let the writing out. I think for autistic people, mental health is an outside-in experience, whereas NT is inside out. Tanya. Alizand, there was something about it in my local city carers brochure this month. This is to do with ABA. Bobby's saying even in care homes, using it on dementia patients. Tanya, there are UK-based businesses that claim to be ND positive that teach parents how to secure full-time ABA behind closed doors. Yeah. It's rebranding it, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
Why is there an need to control people and children?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, I think wider society is quite keen on controlling children anyway. In some ways, we're still coming out of, maybe 2 or 3 generations ago of the children should be seen and not heard. We're developing out of that, but we haven't come all of the way out of it yet. And there is still some elements of that, and certainly that children should be quiet and compliant is a quite popular kind of thought, which is I think it's a really good one for us to unpick. What's that about? Where's that coming from? Why are we not honouring our children as complete human beings, as separate people with their own wants and needs, and able to make as much noise, fuss and mess as they so desire? It's an interesting point we've reached in society, isn't it, where we don't think of children as equal human beings for a lot of the time.
Absolutely. I just want to say to the person who sent the private message, join one of our peer support groups if you haven't already, because they are fantastic.
Yeah, do. There's we're going to put the link for the peer support page, and then on there is a post, and basically as soon as we have enough people to start a group, we start a group, and we'll keep doing that. So there isn't a top amount of groups that we can have. We're quite happy to have lots, and then you can use them as you want. You can use them for a bit of a chat. You can use them to shout into the void. You can ask specific questions. Some of the groups, the knowledge in some of the people that joined has absolutely blown me away, because it's stuff that I've got no idea about at all. So it's so wonderful to have these groups of people together. Lovely. So our next date with Kieran, I did find it, is going to be June the 18th. It will be the same time again. We haven't actually decided completely on a topic. I'd actually love it if it came from you guys. if somebody wants to put in fact, as many as possible, put some things in the comments, or you can post directly onto our page of what you would like Kieran's thoughts and feelings on, what you would like the next Q&A to be around. That would be really wonderful. But thank you very much, Jules. Thank you very much, Shona, for joining us today. And we'll be back in a month. Take care. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thanks, Ruth.
Thanks.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.